Hey, in this review of the Honda CRF230F, I'm going to show you what kind of dirt bike this is, why it may or may not be right for you, and what to expect when buying and riding one. So this Honda 230 is a air-cooled 4-stroke trail bike, and that means it's for beginners, entry-level riders, and just casual trail riders. So let me start off with the engine. It's an air-cooled engine, so there's no radiators to worry about, so it's less likely to overheat, but it's also not super high performance, which is fine if you're just starting out because it's really easy to ride. It has really good low-end torque. The power is super smooth. It's about as easy as it gets for this size of dirt bike to ride. So using the clutch is super easy because you don't need to slip it a lot. First gear is really low. The gears are nicely spaced out so you can ride really slow and just really focus on learning the proper techniques rather than trying to tame the power of a, let's say, 250 enduro bike, because those have 2 to 3 times the power. And so you're starting off on less power is easier to control, easier to handle, especially if you're a newer rider or if you're riding with your kids or just around the farm and you don't really care about power. Now the suspension, that's where Honda saves some money to make it more affordable to you to buy. The suspension is very basic when stock. It's not really adjustable. The forks are not adjustable externally. The shock, it has the sag that you can adjust, the preload, which is important for setting it up for your weight. But other than that, there's no adjustment. It's pretty soft. It's nice and pretty cushy, which is really good for learning how to ride because you're not riding very fast. You can just ride slow on the trails and it'll soak up the bumps pretty well. The problem is when you start pushing the pace. If you're a heavier rider, over 200 pounds, which is still fine if you're just starting out, but once you start riding faster on rougher terrain with rocks and logs and bumps and stuff, you're going to really feel the effects of this cheap suspension. It only has a little over 9 inches of travel, which helps bring the seat height lower, but you don't get as much performance because it won't soak up as much of the bump. So when you do push the pace, you're going to get bucked around a little bit more because the suspension can't keep up with how fast you're going. So the forks and shock, they compress and they're more likely to bottom out. And when it bottoms out, you'll feel and hear a clunk. And then what happens after that, it throws you up. And this can actually be dangerous if you're doing consecutive bumps that are compressing it down so far and it doesn't have time to fully decompress or rebounds too quickly. It can actually throw you forward and this can surprise you. So the stock suspension is not great for racing or riding super fast, but it is upgradable. You can send out the forks to someone like Bruce Triplett. He's an old guy out on the East Coast that is really good with the conventional style forks, and you can upgrade the shock, which is a little more expensive, but if you really want to keep this bike for a while, upgrading the suspension is probably the single biggest thing you can do. Then the carb, the stock carb works pretty well. It's jetted a little bit lean from the factory, so it's a little bit hard to start, especially when cold, so going up a little bit on the pilot, main jet, and needle is usually necessary depending on where you live, your elevation and climate. And then going back to the seat height, it's a little over 34 inches, so this is really good if you're in the 5'3" to 5'8" height range. But it can also work if you're a little bit taller, like 6 foot, so going to a little bit taller handlebars, not too high. And then if you can source someone that has foot pegs that are wider, and some people sell a plate that lowers and brings back the foot pegs, it just opens up the cockpit a little bit more. It gives you a little bit more better ergonomics and comfort because the CRF230F is really tight when it comes to the rider triangle. And the triangle is basically the distance from your hands, the handlebars, to your butt, the seat, to the foot pegs. It's also a great choice if you want electric start. So if you're sick of kick-starting your dirt bike, the push button is really nice to have if you're out on the trail and you're in a tight spot or you just have a bum leg. Pushing the easy button is really nice. It doesn't have a backup Kickstarter, which some people may not like, but as long as you keep the battery in good shape and don't let it get down too low on a charge, you're not going to have a problem. So you shouldn't get this bike if you're a racer and you're looking for a fast dirt bike with the best suspension. Or if you're a short female that's looking for a beginner bike that isn't very strong. This bike is easy to ride, but it's a little bit on the heavy side, around 250 pounds with a full tank of gas. You don't really notice it that much when riding, but if you tip it over, it's a little bit heavier to pick up. So something smaller like a CRF230F, big wheel, would be better if you're not too big for that, if you want a Honda. This bike is for you if you're looking for a mid-size trail bike with the full-size wheels, because it has the 21 18-inch wheels and tires, which is really nice for handling on the trails, going over obstacles, but the lower seat height is nice for being able to touch the ground. And then just a really smooth, super reliable engine. It's super easy to maintain, basically just changing the oil and the air filter, and it can last for years and years, hundreds or even thousands of hours if you just properly maintain it. And that's one of the things that makes it so great. Oh, and it's also super quiet. So the stock exhaust, if you keep the baffle in, it's really quiet. It's like 86 decibels. So if you're in a noise-conscious area, this is a great bike to use, as long as you don't go to an aftermarket exhaust or pull out the baffle, which a lot of people do. I recommend this bike if you're new to dirt biking, getting back into off-road, or you just want a bike that's super easy to ride, because having a bike that's slower and easier to ride will actually make you a better rider faster, because you can focus on learning proper body position, clutch and throttle control, just the proper techniques. And I want to show you how to do that with my free basic techniques guide. It shows you all the basic techniques you need to learn with control and confidence off-road. You can get that, there's a link in the description, or motocrosshideout.com/free-lessons. This is Kelly Fager from Motocross Hideout. Learn more, ride more, so that you can stay safe and have fun for many years to come.